If you're like me, you're always on the hunt for another budget-friendly option when it comes to building apps and shipping things, putting them in production. Heroku used to take the cake for that. You could deploy an app for free and it would be bare bones, but it would get you from point A to B, essentially 0 to 1. Of course, with scaling, Heroku gets costly, and we all know that at this point, but the goal of this video is to kind of give you another route to take should you be on the search for something that's more or less similar to Heroku, but more budget friendly. So Dokku is the answer to that, essentially is what they're at least calling themselves. So it's a platform as a service, essentially, but it's open source in some regard. There is a closed source version, and it does cost, but it is more or less what you would probably maybe get from Heroku, if not more. Tons of options as far as this, tweaking your own installation of Dokku. Basically, you can add a lot of plugins and all these other things under the hood to make it more tailor fit to what your needs. In this example, though, I'm going to just walk you through getting an app from 0 to 1. So from your local environment to a live environment. We won't be going too crazy on the sophistication of like what plugins to use and all of that, but we'll at least get the database and everything set up. Using Digital Ocean is my choice for this. You could use another provider. You just basically need some sort of Ubuntu server. I think you can use even different kind of platforms should you want to. There are installation guides on Dokku, so I recommend checking those out if you run into issues. You probably will. I did in this installation on my own, and it was kind of tricky to get going, and honestly probably not worth the effort considering you could use something else that's just kind of done for you. Granted, you do pay more monthly for that. So it's a trade-off, essentially. If you're going to run your own app someday and you want to know the infrastructure under the hood, I think this is a good exercise. But if it is something you just plan to hand off and kind of focus more on the business logic, definitely probably a good route too, if you're more of that mindset, which I think there's good and bad to those personally. So let's get started. I'm going to create a basic example app in my local environment. It's basically going to do nothing but display a page that we can make sure works in the production environment. So we'll say Rails new Dokku demo. Now naming this is I could probably name it something more not conflicting, but it is what it is. So I'm going to just go with what I made in my notes here. So I'm going to just use these front-end toolings just because that's what I built with. So while this installs, I will take this moment to say what Dokku is. I'll say Dokku is a simple open source platform as a service, otherwise known as a PaaS, or we say like SaaS in the space, but it's PaaS, that allows you to easily deploy and manage applications on a remote server. So essentially just doing their Heroku thing. A mini-Heroku thing is what they kind of refer to it as. But you can host it on your own infrastructure instead of like delegating that to some other party, which is nice. Ownership is pretty crucial these days. So you can deploy your applications with a simple git push command. So just like you would do pretty much with Heroku, and it automatically builds and deploys your code on the remote server. You can hook into other things like GitHub Actions and whatnot using some Docker stuff behind the scenes that supports it. So you can automatically trigger things to run or migrations to run, optimizations to make all that stuff. You can use multiple languages what I know it for is Ruby on Rails, but you could use Python, Node.js, and more. It also provides a web-based dashboard if you want to use that and manage like your SSL certificates, database logic, all that stuff. So essentially, it's just an approach to simplify the process of deploying an app to your production environment. So that's why we're going to check it out today. For whatever reason, it's taking forever to install. So give me 1 second. All right, with that installed, I'll CD into the demo. So I'll say CD Dokku demo, and I'm going to just generate some basic scaffolding to get started here. My typical post scaffold. And I just wanted to do this so we can demonstrate it live on the production server too. So string will be that, content, text, nothing fancy whatsoever. That generates that, Rails DB migrate. And then I'll change the route to be our root route. So I'll open this in Visual Studio Code, go to our config, just uncomment this essentially. Great, okay, with that done, one gotcha I had when doing this that I know is going to come up is the default Dockerfile that comes with Rails these days actually conflicts with Dokku. So I'm going to rename this to the .dockerfile just to ignore it essentially when we do deploy. So you'll want to do that if you're following along. because this depends on other versions for, I think, Kamal, that comes with the newest version of Rails, which I'm going to explore soon. So don't fear. This might be weird that I'm doing Dokku first, but I wanted to kind of explore more. So starting off, we've got that done. Now we can commit our app through just some basic git. So git add and just doing an init commit. Great. That gives us a clean slate to start with. And everything here is not green now, so good. So the next step at this point, which we'll want to basically go find some sort of server to deploy this to. And that's going to essentially depend on something like DigitalOcean. I think Hertzner or whatever it's called nowadays, I say it wrong, has another solution that's probably even cheaper than DigitalOcean, but I just am familiar with DigitalOcean, so I'm just going to go ahead and use it. You will need to add your SSH keys into your app or your server, so you'll need to make sure you accommodate that. Let's see one here. You'll want to go ahead and create a new one and then go through the guide on here on the right. Depending on your system, you can just copy and paste your public SSH key if it's already available. If it isn't, I'd recommend going through this keygen exercise. It's like a brand new system. You're probably gonna have to do that once, and then from then on, you'll have to add your system to the mix here. All right, so Dokku has its own droplet you can add to DigitalOcean by default. We're going to use that actually because it's going to save us some time and quick setup. You could just go through and do your own thing here. There's a guide here if you want to follow it, but I'm going to try to show you what I mean. So let's go and create that. To create this, you will of course need a credit card, everything else under the sun. So they're going to ask you for that when you onboard to the app. We're going to keep everything preset here as far as that goes. I'm going to just make this as plain as possible so you can follow along if you want to. We'll use the basic selection. I'm going to go down to 8 because I don't need no $32 a month plan. I have a SSH key already saved to my app. We can give the host name if we want to give it some unique name. I don't really care. You can just do this. We'll call it Dokku Fun just to give it something obvious. So there we go. We can go ahead and create that app. It's going to be $8 a month based on what we use. Very basic setup. And it should go ahead and deploy that. Now we have an easier way to declare it on the command line too, since it's got a simple name. Now, if you haven't added your SSH keys in that process, there is a WYSIWYG guide essentially to show you how to do that. Your local environment will have SSH keys already, or you'll need to generate one. It's kind of the base setup that you would need to do to get started with doing this, so you can actually SSH into your machine from your local terminal here, or use something like Git to kind of get through and push stuff up to it. It makes it the quality of life a lot easier, even though it is a little more technical. So it's something to keep in mind. Now they do have typically a SSH terminal on the actual app in the web view here if you want to try that, but that's mostly just if you absolutely need to use it, in my opinion. All right, when this installs, we should have a new IP address to make use of. This IPv4 one is the one we're really going to make main usage of. So it's a Ubuntu machine running Dokku app. So it's kind of already been installed in some regards, some of the stuff we need as far as dependencies go. So I'll copy that, and I'm going to make sure I can SSH in. So we can say SSH root at that IP. And it should give you this thing, basically just prompting you to say if you want to continue. I'm going to say yes. And it should give you, say, welcome to blah, 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 blah. So it should be ready to rock and roll. One thing you need to do, if you look here, set up user's SSH key for deployment by passing the public SSH key as shown. So we need to get our public SSH key in the contents of this, and then we'll copy it essentially in this way. So you could essentially go get your key, which I'm going to do, and I'll come back. Okay, so with that added, if you saw that message before, you needed to add your SSH key into that quotation mark and then run that command, and it'll add an admin user to your Dokku installation, which is great. It kind of sets things up so you're able to access it via Git and all those things. And it sets a public key constant, so it's like an environment variable, so you always have access. So in this case, we can run Dokku at this point. So we could say Dokku will need to create an app on a remote environment. So we'll say Dokku apps create, And I'll just do a Dokku demo. And it goes ahead and creates that essentially. So it's running that new virtual host file. Now, if you ran something with underscores in the name, it would probably kick back an error saying, hey, that's not right. So that's something to keep in mind. You probably want to use the kebab case. So next we need to figure out, okay, we need some sort of database. It doesn't come stock with Dokku. So it's just assuming you're going to add a plugin for that. So one thing we need to figure out is what we want to use. In my case, I'm going to use Postgres because it's kind of the default I typically use. You can use something like MySQL if you want to, up to you essentially. So let's run sudo. This is another command for that, Dokku plugin install, and then I'll actually get from the repo github.com/Dokku/Dokku postgres.git. Let's make sure that's spelt right. Looks like it. So I'll run that and see if it goes and fetches it. It does. Downloads that stuff. We'll also need to create a database once this is complete. So that's something to keep in mind. All right. So inside our server, we just had that installed, the Postgres. Now we can run the creation of a database. So let's do that. So Dokku Postgres create, and then Dokku demo. I think I called it Dokku demo like that, but let's call it DockerDB. Terrible names, by the way, but it's okay. Okay, database created. We call it DockerDB, so we'll need to reference that locally in our app. But before we do, we need to link that back to our other app we created. So if you could think back, we had Postgres link Dokku demo. I think I call it with that. And then we'll want to, it'll be DockerDB, excuse me. And then we'll link it back to Dokku demo, which is the whole app. We could have called it like Dokku app to make it a little more easily identifiable, but apologies for the names. This is where naming things is hard. I should have come up with something better, but I apologize. So let's try that. There we go. So now that Postgres link, the actual database URL is linked to our app in that regard. And our app's like, not found. Let me see if that's not right. Okay. That's it. It's already linked. Okay. The whole not found got me wondering what was going on there. So good. So Dokku demo is our app, and we're able to essentially point to that database at this point. So we should be set as far as everything else is concerned. The database URL example is one that was needed to be set before the Rails app would actually function correctly. So if you go to dokku.docs/community/plugins, I believe there will be other stuff you can make use of here that essentially makes it way easier to use. Like Let's Encrypt would be useful, in my opinion, to add SSL once you want to do that. Redis, any kind of scheduling kind of stuff for background jobs. All that stuff's kind of made to rock and roll with the framework. It takes a little more technical setup and understanding of it, but it is something you can do. So that's one benefit to it. You have complete ownership of what structure you want to make it, which is nice, but also not in many regards. So let's go back to the app here. I'm going to go and make a change. So our database is set up to be PostgreSQL. Currently, when you do a Rails new, it's SQLite by default, which isn't exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and change that. And there's a command we can run to do that. So we say Rails DB system change, and then you can pass a flag with 2 dashes and 2 equals, I'm going to do PostgreSQL. Nice little hack. It's going to say conflict because there is already a database YAML file in the app, and that's because it's set up to use the SQLite from the start. But since we're doing a brand new app, it's not a big deal. So I'll just overwrite it, and I'll force and change that file. Then it will go fetch and remove our existing SQLite gem in the gem file and add PG to the mix. So this gets replaced right here, as you noticed. then it go ahead and installs it. So you can run bundle install. It should already have basically been done. Well, I don't know if I have Postgres installed on my app, so that might, my computer, I mean, so that might be an issue. So I'll say brew install PostgreSQL and see what happens. I'll report back in a second. All right, so it turns out I didn't have Postgres installed on my system, so I went ahead and did that with Homebrew. It took a little while, and I am back. So everything did finally install correctly. I run bundle, everything's installed with that new PG gem we added during the database switch there. So we should be ready to rock and roll in that regard. One thing we need to do first, though, is change our database config to use our new database name in the production environment. So what I'll do is go to database.yml, go down to the production. It's going to have these. And since we didn't call it Dokku demo in production, we're going to call it, I think it was Dokku demo and Dokku demo, like that. And we'll just call this one database URL for the password, since that's what it's expecting. And I know that's not the typical naming convention you'd probably use, but that's okay, I think, in this case, just to show you the example. Yeah, up to you how you want to handle that. So let's go and see if things work out. First, though, we need to make sure our Git setup is ready to rock and roll. We need to add an origin. So it essentially is our newly formed server here. So we have our main origin, which is where you'd probably do something like GitHub, and then you can add another origin on your Git. That would be, say, the app. So you can add as many origins as you want. So this is kind of the Heroku way. They'd add a new origin that's called Heroku, essentially. Maybe you'd do that similar thing, and then you could push to it whatever branch or tag or whatever you want is. So all from the command line, which is powerful. So let's add a new remote. We'll say get remote add, and then I'm going to call this one Dokku just to be on brand. And then what I'll do is it's going to be Dokku at the server IP you use. So in our case, I'm going to go grab that IP4 one there, paste that in, and then it will be the name of your app. So Dokku demo, just like that. And I believe that should do the trick. And I'm hopeful that that will make us be able to say git push Dokku main. There it goes. So with that new remote branch added, you're able to go ahead and deploy to the app. It does do its build process much similar to Heroku, if you've seen that before, where it does these things on command, essentially all these build packs, installs your bundler stuff, all that stuff. It's pretty done for you in this case. So it is nice to know that at least, even though with a little more effort, it does do some of this stuff as far as bundling goes. Let's see if we hit any errors. I did in the original try of this, but things update very fast these days, so we'll see if it still does it. All right, so we got an error, and let's see what happened here at the root of it. Place gem, error loading, PostgreSQL, active record adapter, missing gem. It depends on PG is no part of the bundle added to your gem file. I did, though. That's funny. So we don't have, at the moment, a regular Procfile, so I'm going to duplicate this one and just make it Procfile. I think that's what it depends on. So that's one thing I forgot. So what I will do is get rid of these and just keep this going. So bin Rails server. Let's see if that works. I'm not sure what the issue might be at this case. Well, I need to get. Oh, I think I forgot to change. Add PG gem and the Procfile, basically. Forgot to version control that. Oops. Git add. I think it was just a matter of git. Okay, let's try this once more. And git push Dokku main. Try that. There we go. I think PG is actually installing at this point. We didn't have it before because I forgot to version control it. So keep that in mind. Don't be stupid like me. With our URL here, it's not really going to work in our case, but you can go to the IP and you should see the Nginx stuff. I'm trying to figure out if that's the one we want to be at, actually. So I think that was the issue I've had where this wasn't accessible and it was related to Nginx and SSL. So what I'm going to do next is go and ensure in our production environment, in our configuration, on the environment of production, we're going to go into force SSL and just turn this off for now. I believe that's an issue that I had that was like, what is going on? Build it again, try that once more. And if that doesn't work, there was one more issue that I will dive into should we need to. And I don't know if this is a known thing, but it just wasn't working for me. So this is kind of where you know, why it might be worth going the, full PaaS route where you get everything done, you just deploy and everything's ready to rock and roll. And in this case, I'm troubleshooting, just trying to get an app live, so there's trade-offs for sure. All right, once more, still doing that thing. So I'm going to go one step further and try something else. So say SSH. We're going to do root at the server, which is, and I'm doing this all because I don't want to buy a domain just to see that this is bugging out, so the cheap, Mr. Cheap, but project, go to my apps, get the URL or the IP, root into there we go. And going to do a couple things. We're going to CD up. Should see more files there if you do ls. And then inside of etc, we'll go cd etc. See a lot here. We'll want to cd into Nginx. And then enabled sites, or in this case, sites enabled, cd sites enabled. I'm going to remove the default. So this is what's weird. So don't ask me why this does what it does, but if we remove the default, should be gone now. We could close that connection, and I'll try once again to visit this and see if we can visit the app. Still not doing it. In that case, let's try it once more. I'm going to need to SSH into the app once more. Is that the right IP? I think so. Yeah. So with that, we can say Dokku PS restart Dokku demo, and let's hope for the best here. Okay, so at least we're getting some Rails errors here. If you're familiar with the public error page design, that's one right there. So we can at least see what's going on. If we want to see what is actually wrong, logs. We could see our logs here. What is actually happening? Select post from posts, undefined table. I think we don't have it migrated. Let's try this line, see if it works. So let's go into, before I do all this, we'll add this to our Procfile, which is where you can declare things that get run during the deployment. So I'm going to try get add. I guess we'll spell it right. Procfile. Git push Dokku main. Ignore this. I need to update my git, global git, but success. Awesome. So that was the culprit. I did not have a release declaration in my Procfile, which made the migration not actually run, which is something you need to think about with Heroku. Heroku has a CLI where you can do it on the command line. You could see that I stumbled my way through this, so this isn't something I'm not very versed with, but I wanted to do that to get you familiar with how you can maybe use Dokku to run your own setup with a Rails app. So we could see that you can create one, go to your domain here or your server IP and be able to access it. Now, this isn't secure. You would want to install maybe SSL and get all that stuff configured. I want to leave that up to you. But personally, my initial take is this is way too complex for me personally. But if you're familiar with Dokku or know the way around server provisioning and all that stuff, this might be a piece of cake. So take it with a grain of salt. But I would say for $8 a month and having this, be the next way you serve your next app might be worthwhile. So definitely check it out. The documentation's probably got way more edge cases and things to keep in mind, how you configure your domains, all that stuff. Luckily, there is a CLI around it, so you can see they do make it accessible. It just requires, I think, a lot of deep studying, so you understand how to do it and how to manage it on the fly. My worry with something like this is if something were to go wrong on my app, how I quickly, reboot the app, get it up and running again. A lot of the SaaS or PaaS apps out there, you can just literally click a button and reinstall the app or restart it. That's pretty useful in those kinds of high stress moments, where this would be something you need to like SSH in, do some surgery, and come back to it and figure it all out. So I hope this was useful. I know I stumbled through it. Apologies for that. But if you follow the written guide, it'll be more straightforward. So definitely check that out. I'll try to cut and paste and edit this a little bit better if you're watching it. All that to say, so long for now. If you like this video, I will do more just like this on other application platforms. There's a few out there like Fly.io, Render, all those I'm interested in checking out. So I'll try to do some more with those. All right. I'll see you in the next one.